Sports Avenue Twisted Podcast. Rob and Rocky talks everything sports.
Welcome to another edition of the Sports Avenue Twisted Podcast. We have a guest in here who's a writer, an advocate for high school baseball amateur prospects, and we had a great friend of ours who was in our last episode, Mark Garland, who helped us get him. And he also works for a college baseball show as well, Just Baseball, and he has a podcast called On the Clock. Tyler Jennings, welcome. It's an honor for you to have you on, and we're excited to see what your expertise is about, talking about amateur baseball, high school prospects. We're excited, so welcome.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you guys having me on, and shout out to Mark. He's an awesome guy and have had nothing but great things happen with him joining us. So I'm excited that not only he recommended me to you guys, but to even be on the show is fun. I'm excited to talk some shop with you guys.
Yeah, we're excited too, because this is something that we get to learn about with you, with talking about some of these high school players that we don't know much about. So it's really fun for us at the same time, and to have you on is awesome, man. So we thank you again.
Yeah, no, like I said, thank you guys for having me on. I'm always down to talk shop with anybody that ever has. So I want to say it's a blessing to be able to do this at this point.
Yeah, for sure, man. And we're actually excited, and we're going to learn from this episode. And we would like to know what's going on this year's draft, because we're so big into this draft every year. We talk about high school, college, whatever. And another year of going through this, it's an awesome time to talk about it. So let's get started here. So talk about this year's high school class who are draft eligible. Like, what are the strengths in this year's class? Because you look at the list, and we'll get into all the specific positions later in the episode, but how would you say the strengths of this year's draft class would be?
So the easy one that really sticks out to me is the prep pitching, which I've talked with people in the past. It's a very volatile demographic. Like, you look at where some of these first prep pitchers go, they're usually not the top 10, except for like rare cases like Seth Hernandez a year ago. And this year, the pitching is, the best part of that side of the demographic, mainly because of what we have at the top. There's 4 premier Southpaws in this class, in Gio Rojas, Brody Bumia, Logan Schmidt, and then you've got Carson Bullman, who they're all projected to go in the first round at this stage of the game. And then there's a good couple of bats in the class as well. Obviously Grady Emerson is the number 1 guy, but then you got really big upside in Jacob Lombard. There's a few guys even farther down the board, like Eric Booth from Mississippi, that really stuck out when I saw them last summer. So there's a lot of talent in this class, and I would say, like I said, the pitching's the premier part of this class for them. But I think overall it's a pretty solid class. Comparing it to what we've had in the past, there's some more higher end bats at the top than, say, what we had a year ago, Ethan Holiday. So I think this is as good of a class as we've seen recently. Probably not as good as 2023, but it's not too far behind, in my opinion.
When it comes to two-way players, not too many actually end up sticking two-way players, but there's a top 20 prospect in this year's class, Jared Grinlinger, and they have him listed as a left-handed pitcher, outfielder. Do you think he remains a two-way player? Tell us a little bit about him and how he profiles as a prospect in this year's class.
Yeah, to start off with, he's a recent reclass. He was originally a 2027 prospect. He reclassed, and I want to say it was like February or March. So it was a really, really late reclass. But yeah, with two-way guys, I think we've kind of undersell the idea that two-way is really, really tough. It is. There's not a ton of guys, especially when you look at some of the guys farther down the board that have two-way abilities. They have to choose a path at some point down the line. Grinlinger, in my opinion, is one of the guys where it's either he's going to figure it out after 2 years in pro ball, because of his age. He's going to be 17 years and 2 months on draft day. So whoever drafts him is going to have a ton of time to just stick him on the complex and have like 2 years to figure out what his path is. But he's super talented. He's been up to 96, 97 from the left side, has a really good breaking ball. But what I've heard from scouts and going through film is they really like him as a bat moving forward right now. He glides in the outfield. He can be a center field to right field kind of guy who is going to grow more into power, more into his body. The hit tool has been fantastic the past couple of summers that he's been able to be on the circuit. And, this is he's at USA, he's at area codes. He's had a lot of guys look at him. And to be able to be that good as a two-way compared to some of his peers has been impressive. So I think there's a chance that he can be a two-way guy. I think the likelihood is that as he gets older, like I say, he's going to be 17-2 on draft day. He's got a couple years where a team could put him in the complex and kind of figure out what is the best scenario. Can you show us what you can do for 2 years? He could come out as a bat, could be as an arm, or it could be both. I think there's a legitimate chance that with Greenlinger, he can be this special kind of talent and can do both at the same time. But like I had mentioned, scouts have really loved the bat this spring. And I would not be shocked if that's the ultimate route that they go with him. But he's an interesting case. I think this is going to be really exciting to follow for a couple of years to see what his outlook is as a prospect in general.
Well, you brought up Greenlinger as a two-way player, and if you think about two recent guys that come in my mind is Jack Caglione. Now he's an outfielder now officially, and Brendan McKay, a player that was drafted by the Rays years ago, and he just never turned out to be the player he is. Like, we know that obviously Ohtani is the two-way player, but even then, Bryce Eldridge as well. But with Ohtani, he's starting to slow down a bit in the way baseball's going because he's not even batting every day, and he's pitching. When he's pitching, he's not batting. Could we see something like that with Greenlinger or any other like high school prospect in the future?
It wouldn't shock me if we see someone do that. Obviously, you mentioned Ohtani, and I think that's where, when you have a two-way guy like this, you start throwing out the Ohtani label because that's the guy. That's the guy that we see at the major league level do it. But you mentioned Caglianone, and yeah, he touched 100 from the left side as a junior at Florida and was hitting balls at 120. But there were obvious concerns on the mound for me when I saw him because he couldn't really command the strike zone very well. He could fatigue very quickly. I remember that year he got to Omaha with Florida and he was pitching 90-92 in their final game of the season, or one of their final games of the season. So it was pretty clear then that he was going to be a bat, and the question was just how much contact could he make. And now obviously he's in the big leagues, he's hitting bombs. With Greenlinger, I have more confidence seeing him as an arm, mainly because of the fact that it's really polished for his age. Like, you don't find a lot of guys who can throw strikes and have that kind of stuff at that age. And obviously, again, like I said, with the bat, like, it's super smooth. He's going to grow into his body. He's going to get stronger. The power's going to show up. And there's been high marks for his defense in the outfield and how he glides and how he can cover ground. So I think when you look at recent guys, he's probably got the best chance to be a two-way. Of like the Caglianones. You mentioned McKay. I think McKay was a great example, and I hate the fact that injuries really derailed that career because he was going to be a really, really good arm. But yeah, I think he's got the best chance of any at this moment to be a two-way. The future classes, we'll see. There's still evolutions to make in those. So it's too early for me to say like who can really stick out as a two-way guy from those classes. But as of right now, I think Greenlinger has the best shot of any at the current state.
With that being said, let's talk about the top high school prospects in this year's class. And the guy that's been talked about the most is Grady Emerson. And Grady Emerson's, some people think that he could be the number one pick. Some people think he could be number two pick. It all depends on what happens with Rock Chalowski, wherever he's selected, which he's also projected to go number one. But talk about the top prospects high school-wise. With him, Jacob Lombard is another name that's been brought up, and there's rumors about the Giants drafting him at 4. Gio Rojas is considered the top pitcher in this class. And Eric Booth Jr., he's a unique case because a lot of people have been talking about it with his tools that he might have the most upside. So talk about some of those guys, and if there's any other names that I didn't mention, talk about the rest of those guys.
Yeah, I'll start off with Emerson, and he's had an interesting evolution. Like last year, he held wire to wire throughout the summer as the number one guy, in my opinion, and that's really tough to do in this day of age. Like you go back a couple years, some of the guys who were the first prep guy off the board were not either they're not heavily scouted during the summer or they weren't the number one guy throughout the entire circuit. So for Emerson to do that is really impressive. And this year, he's opened up the swing a little bit. And what I mean by that is like he was very even stanced last summer. And he was kind of, I would say, twisting himself into the ground more and kind of focused on the hit tool and not really showing the power. But this year, he's opened up the front leg. He's a lot more open to the pitcher. And I think that's allowed him to get more quicker hands through the zone. He's getting more loft. He looks a lot better on some of the film that I've seen from Texas. And, you know, you mentioned the idea that he could be the first overall pick. You know, there's only been 2 college shortstops go 1-1 in, I believe, history. And Rock could be the third. But Grady's as good as they come. And I think there's a chance for a plus hit tool. I would say average to above average power once he fills out his frame a bit more. And he's looked really, really good at shortstop. So I think he's the best of the entire group. Jacob Lombard might be a better defender at shortstop, in my opinion. Like, this is a kid that's freakishly athletic. We know his brother George is in the Yankee system and has done a fantastic job defensively, and the offense is starting to take up too. But with Jacob, you know, the arm strength is incredible. The athleticism is fantastic. The hit tool is going to need some work. And the biggest thing, he ran a K rate above 30% on the summer circuit a year ago. And it was kind of, I don't want to say depressing to watch. I think the best way to describe it is the foundation was there. You want to see it improve, but it just never did. And he's got the plus raw power. I want to see the swing improve, and I want to see him be able to make contact more consistently, because at the moment, I think the hit tool is more of a 30 right now. And if the hit tool gets to a 40 or 45, I think he's a 5-tool talent. So it's just a matter of, for me, what does contact outlook look for him? You know, it could be Elijah Green, where we're infatuated by these athletic traits that he has, but he can't hit. And I think as scouting has evolved, like the past couple of years, we've seen this case. We've seen a couple other cases where like super freakishly athletic guys who just can't put it together. Not saying Lombard can be that, but like that is the worry about some scouts. And the biggest thing for me is kind of just seeing how the contact plays out. If he can get it to a 40 hit tool or even 45, like this is a 4 to 5 win player at the major league level if everything really just connects. And obviously, you know, compare that to Grady. Like Grady's more polished than Lombard, obviously, but the upside with Lombard is just fantastic, and you can't really ignore that kind of tools. That's why scouts go after these athletic traits. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, you know? So those 2 guys for me are just like, they're 1 and 2. They're going to be 1 and 2 for a while. Outside of that, like Eric Booth, you mentioned, people are kind of like, I think the best way to describe it, they're indecisive on the swing. Like it's pretty flat. It's a little weird because he's short to the ball. He doesn't lift it. There's no real loft to the swing, but for him, it's incredible bat speed. The contact's been there. He's incredibly quick. He has quick foot speed. He hauls booty down the line. And he can go and get it in a corner outfield spot, man. It's really impressive what he's been able to do. He's also hit balls at 108 with wood bat, which obviously you're not going to find that a ton at the prep level or the amateur level with wood bat for some of these guys, because they're not physically mature. So all the tools have been there. He's been incredible this spring from people I've spoken to. And he looks every bit of a top 10 draft pick for me. And he, like I said, he lit up the USA pitching last year in carry. Like he went I would say he went 8 for 10 at one point during phase 2 of training camp and didn't make the team, which was unfortunate. But like he has the tools to be a really, really, really good outfielder at the next level. So with those guys out of the way, like those are the top 3 for me in this class. Gio Rojas is in there right now as like the most upside of a prep pitcher. But I would say the polish still lacks a little bit when you compare it to some other guys like Carson Bullman. I think he could be a 55 fastball, 2+ breaking pitches with an average or above average changeup, throws strikes. That's polish right there. Rojas has the slingy arm side, or not the arm side, but like the arm slot where it's low and it really jumps on hitters, and you get it up to 97. But the biggest issue right now is I feel like strikes can go, they're pretty streaky. Scatter command at times. The breaking ball is a little bit too soft for my liking, but it has good snap and good bite to it. And the changeup looks really, really good. I just want to kind of see, like, can we get the command reined in a little bit? Can we get the loose limbs kind of brought in to where he's more consistent with his delivery, he's not missing glove side as often, and kind of tap into that upside that he has? Because he can be the best, southpaw from this class if everything kind of fines tuned together. So, yeah, that's really the answer with those 5 guys. Admittedly, is like there's a lot of moving pieces. There's polish to some of these guys, and you look at upside and you bet on the upside and hope from there. So, obviously, lots of talent, but there's definitely some question marks that need to be answered with some of these guys, and that's just how it is with most prospects at the amateur level. Anyways, it's you're looking at these tools, you're looking at what we think it could be. That doesn't mean that's obviously going to be the case. We're just thinking like, we see this kid with outstanding athletic traits, outstanding bat speed, but obviously struggles to hit. Like if he can hit, then he's going to be a fantastic player and have, value at the major league level. But if he can't get there, then, it's a big question of what if or what it could have been. So that's just how scouting is. And it's a tough game. It really is. It's really tough to not only get into it, but also understand the process. And it's taken years for me to get to that point. And I'm sure anybody that's looking to get into baseball scouting, is going to take years for them to understand it. You're going to be wrong more than you're right. And that's perfectly fine. So like some of the stuff I've said today, a couple years from now, might not be true. So it's just a matter of accepting that you're going to be wrong 99% of the time. And you're fine with that, because that's just the way that life is. Like failure is part of life. You're going to be wrong most of the time, but that 1% you get right is going to make you feel so great. And it's like you're going to be happy with what you do and enjoy, I guess, the ride and the thrill that is scouting.
Yeah, it's definitely not an exact science, that's for sure. You mentioned Eric. You mentioned Eric Booth Jr. Already, but some of the other outfielders in this class, and you talk about Jared Grinlinger and how scouts are so enamored with his bat. And then you got Trevor Condon, Noah Wilson, Blake Bowen, Kevin Roberts, and Malachi Washington, and so on. So talk about some of the outfielders in this class and some of the guys that impress you at the prep level.
Yeah, Trevor Condon, number one for me, is we've seen a trend where teams trying to go after these like really toolsy outfielders that are young, they have elite athleticism, and they try and make everything work. I think the best way to describe it is like Trevor Condon has like a very weird swing where you kind of have to like, you look at the hands, he's got like an old school swing where he kind of loads up, he waits, and then he fires through. So he's got the twitch. And he can play center field. He's a gamer. Like when we talk about gamers, like he plays with his hair on fire, essentially. And like scouts love that kind of attitude. They love that kind of game style. So like being able for him to be able to do that is impressive. But like the bats come around, he's added more strength to his body. There's more power. So I think there's a chance that he can be a first rounder and kind of turn into this like spark plug, top of the order kind of guy where he'll get on base. He'll let the conga line keep going and have some power to kind of go with it. And he can provide value in center field. So he's a guy to kind of watch in the back end of the first. And guys like Noah Wilson, like you had mentioned, Blake Bowen. Blake Bowen, I thought was, I talked to a couple of guys this past summer, scouts and scouting directors who thought that he was probably the best overall prep guy in this class at one point. Obviously, I would say on the public scale, we never really went that far. But like for us, we put him at number 2 or number 3 because the the raving reviews that we would get from these scouting directors, these scouts were saying like, we think this kid could be a legitimate threat to not only play center field long term, but he's big body, he's got power, and the hit tool's not bad, and like he can really go out and get it. So I think with him, obviously he's still kind of the same guy. Like he hasn't really put himself farther forward, which is why we feel like he's kind of fallen back a little bit on some public boards. Like he's gone from like a top 10 guy to like 20 to 30. But I think that's just a testament to the guys that have risen up in this class to really usurp what he's been able to do, which is not a bad thing for Bowen. I think Bowen's still one of the better outfielders in this class, and I feel like he's going to be a guy that we look at a couple years from now. It's like he's a double A, maybe hitting like 230, 240, but has like 15 home runs. Can walk, get a copious amount of walks, and provides you some center field or even right field defense. So he's a guy that like I said, he's not really changed who he is, but at the same time, he was getting rave reviews from guys over the summer, and I don't think he's going to fall out of the first round, in my opinion. And guys like Noah Wilson will be like a second or third rounder with the same kind of tool set as Condon, where he's super athletic. The hit tool, we're still kind of working to see what happens. Like last summer, it was just super flat, and he hit the ball on the ground too hard, or too much rather. But at the same token, he can fly. He's a 70 grade runner, and some guys will even have 80 grades on the speed, and he can really go out and get it in center field. So he's got the tools outside of that to really shine. And for Wilson, it's just a matter of kind of tweaking that swing to make it to where he can get into some more power. And really, if you can get him to like a gap to gap approach and let his speed do the talking on the base pass, that's value. That's something that scouts look at and say, like, if you can provide 20 doubles a season or even more than that based on your speed and the ability for you to find the gaps, like you're going to get WAR out of that. So it's like there's some guys that are really interesting at the bottom of this. Even go past that with some of the outfielders. Looking farther down, you mentioned Kevin Roberts. I think he's a freakish athlete, but obviously the hit tool hasn't been there. He might be some guys like Quentin Young from last year, who the Twins took in second round. You look at another guy, Luke Williams could be an outfielder. He's kind of splitting time between shortstop and outfielder, but he can play center field. He's another guy that like outlandish athletic traits, waiting for the offense to really come around, but he can definitely do some damage. Nathaniel Davis, Malachi Washington, these guys that can really. Malachi is interesting because he's like super quick hands. He can really put a thump into the baseball. He never had home runs in his arsenal until his junior year of high school, which is fascinating. Now he's hitting like 15 things a year as a high schooler. And then like Davis is a left-handed guy who can be the top of the order guy, but the hit tools, we're working on it, trying to see like what's something we can tweak with to kind of get him to velocity more, or like can he improve against breaking balls and kind of like put himself into like a Noah Wilson or a Trevor Condon. So like there's a lot of guys that can really, they have the traits to do stuff in the outfield and do a very good job of doing it. It's just a matter of fine tuning it and getting it to a point where you can extract value offensively from it.
Let's talk about the catcher class here. And I'm intrigued about this because we know that catchers take the longest to develop overall, if you look at the track record, the way baseball's at right now. But talk a bit about some of the high school players. And I want to see where you're at with this, because there's a bunch of names out there. And Will Brick is considered the top catcher in this year's high school class. And then you got Sean Dunlap, Jack Brenner, John Stowers. The list goes on. But talk about some guys and who gets overshadowed, because I feel like catchers are a type of position where it's kind of like a franchise type of move that you got to consider, because it's so hard to find catchers in today's baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will at least preface with this. Scouting catchers at the amateur level, especially high school, is really, really tough, because obviously, we compare like the umpiring skills from high school to college to pros. It's obviously a very linear graph when you look at it. Like high school, you got guys that are getting called strikes. Like Xavier Nyans was getting called strikes on the outer third, if you want to call it that, but they were in the opposite batter's box, and it's tough to get a route on like framing and everything and showing off skills for backstops. But Will Brick's been the guy that like stood out far, and he's another reclass from 2027. He's a guy that really stood out to me last summer. Like playing a year up at 18U training camp, it's incredible arm strength. He's explosive out of the crouch. There was a couple throws. He went like back-to-back innings where he's throwing guys out of third base in the same game, or second base rather. And like he made it look easy. He was throwing from his knees. He did the obvious like Yadier Molina throw from your knees, let it tail into the glove and get the runner. It's been fantastic to watch him, excel defensively. And that's one of the guys where you're like, okay, he's going to be a catcher at the next level. There's no question about it. And you just don't find that at the prep level. You mentioned Sean Dunlap. Like, yes, he's been a catcher, but he's 6'3", 205. He's not your typical, size for a catcher. He's much taller than that. He's also a freakish athlete that can go and get it in center field or right field. He's a guy that's like, I would say atypical for a position. Like he's super powerful, but he's a 70 grade runner. He has a fantastic arm that can play in the outfield. And I think that might be where he ends up. Jack Brenner, he's a guy that it's more of a hit tool than power, and you're expecting more power from a catcher. But he's played shortstop. He's played in the outfield as well. So he might be a guy that's more like a utility guy. So like those guys, Will Brick obviously clears both of those two, but Sean Dunlap's going to get a lot of run in probably like the second or third round. I would say Brenner probably third to fourth. Jaworski Lane Jr., who's the son of Jaworski Lane from the NFL back in like the early 2010s. He's a guy that was a catcher at first last year, but we saw the skills weren't really as good as his peers. He would play outfield, and I think that's where his future is going to be, mainly because I think his route running has gotten better. He's improved out there. He's not really going to be a catcher at the next level. But even looking past that, like there's a guy farther down the board that I really like, and it's Alain Gomez-Gudinho, who he didn't make our top 100 board on the Just Baseball site, admittedly. He was a tough cut, but he's a guy that, like Will Brick, he has the defensive shots to be a catcher, but he's played third base this year because, like I said, it's just so tough to scout catchers at the high school level. And he's been fine there, but like guys really do like the skills he has behind the plate. He's really explosive, has great arm strength. He can be a viable average defender at the big league level. And if the bat never comes around, then that's fine. He's got floor as like a defensive replacement, or like he's in the lineup to kind of, stabilize the pitching staff. He handles them well. But obviously, that's his strength. And catchers like that can have long careers, like Jeff Mathis. You look at a couple other guys, like not Patrick Bailey, for example. Like a Dodgers catcher. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's been there forever. Not Will Smith, but he's like a backup to catch like Clayton Kershaw in the past. So like these guys,
AJ Ellis,
yeah. So like these guys that are defensive first catchers can have long careers, but obviously you're not expecting much value from them. So like again, Will Brick is probably the most valuable catcher in this class. How much value you can get out of him, we'll see. Like the hit tool, he's prioritized hit tool over power as a prep. And I would like to see that kind of change to where he taps in more power, because he has above average power to me. But the defense is going to be the money maker for him, and I would not be shocked if he gets run in the second round. To get paid and to bypass a pretty stout Mississippi State commitment. Like these guys have a lot of really stout commitments, but you pay him like $2 million. He'll take it and he'll sign. So he's one of the guys that I'm really high on. And I think at the end of the day, like Will Brick is going to be the best catcher from this draft class. I don't think that's an outlandish prediction to make at this stage.
We know that shortstop is one of the most coveted positions in baseball, and a lot of high school shortstops in this class are of the highest upside. With Grady Emerson, you got Jacob Lombard, his brother George playing with the Yankees farm system. Aiden Ruiz, Tyler Spungler, James Clark, the list goes on. Just talk about how deep this class is, and some guys that you like to mention about this class with shortstop.
Yeah, I would say compared to like shortstop class last year, where like Ethan Holiday was very clearly the 1-1, and or not 1-1, but like the top guy in the shortstop class. There's not a ton of depth behind that. Last year had that depth, and this year it kind of really doesn't. Because when you look at, I'll bring up James Clark for example. He played at NHSI a couple months ago, and there are questions about, for me, like I wanted questions answered, like what's the footwork look like? Does he rush himself? Like that's something you kind of look for. How good is the internal clock? Because we've seen these guys that like to speed themselves up. They make errors, they make mistakes, and then they kind of just look back and go, "It's like we need to improve this." And he was kind of doing that a little bit. And he's a guy that's going to be like hit first, not a ton of power, but he hit the gas with good speed. Not to say he's a slappy hitter, but there's some force to go behind it. But he's a guy that could get run in center field because of his speed, and I think his tools probably fit better in that position right now. But like I said, he was kind of rushing himself a little bit shortstop wise, defensively, and that's something that needs to be improved on. If he's not a shortstop, he's a center fielder. Tyler Spangler, he's as projectable as they come, as a sweet lefty swing, but he struggled to really punish the baseball. And the biggest thing was like he never really separated his hips and shoulders. Like you're expecting the hips to kind of open up first as your shoulders come through. And he just never really did that last summer. It was a lot of line drives. He would hit at guys, never really in the air all that much. So scouts want to see that improve. But he's solid at shortstop. He might grow into his body more and move to third base as a result. So he's another guy that might not play shortstop. And, that kind of goes down the list too. Like Aiden Ruiz, he's probably the guy behind Emerson and Lombard who I'm sold on the idea of being a shortstop. He's very twitchy, has great range, good arm strength for Carthus Diamond. The hit tool is probably his biggest thing. He's a pest. The swing decisions are great. He's going to be a guy that draws a lot of walks. He'll hit balls into the gap for power. But once he's on the bases, he's running, he's going, he's gone. He's like, saying he's a pest is a compliment, because this is a guy that pitchers are going to hate to face because he's going to get on base and just cause mayhem. And I think that's a really good attribute to have. Moving past him, like Archer Horn, who's getting a lot of buzz recently. He's had a very, very good spring, and we saw him last summer. And the lefty swing, it's a little crude. You got to kind of work on some rough edges, but the power's there. He can go to the gaps. He's going to grow more into his body. He's nimble at shortstop. I think he stays there. Also has the arm strength. He's gotten on the mound before, touched 94, and the arm strength still plays and translates to the infield as well. So he's a guy that I really like. Within day 1 to day 2, Taj Marchand from South Carolina is another guy that like kind of under the radar, but guys are going to love the tools. They love the gameplay. He's got a lot of stretch. And what I mean by that is like when he goes to kind of like lunge at the ball, he's creating a lot of stretch from his front foot to his backhand. And that's valuable for him. Like it's something that's like super elastic, super flexible. And if you can get the swing to where he's more compact, he's going to hit for both average and power. So he's a guy that I really like. And moving farther past that too, like Will Yao from Virginia. Obviously mentioned Jack Brenner earlier. He could play shortstop as well. Trey Ebel, who's Brady Ebel's son and Dino's son. Brady's brother and Dino's son, from the Dodgers and the Angels. So like there's a lot of guys in the shortstop class farther down the board that are intriguing, but not the same kind of like depth that we had a year ago, where we had, I want to say, like 8 to 10 high school shortstops drafted in the first 40 picks. So, again, there's upside, there's stuff to look at, but I think there's a lot more question marks farther down the board compared to what it was a year ago.
Let's talk about the top left-handed pitchers, and you already mentioned a couple of them already with Grinlinger and Rojas as the top guys. But talk a little bit down there, and Brody Bumia. so much to say his name, but like he's been the name that I've been seeing a lot, and his stuff is so like he has power stuff. Like, I mean, stuff that scouts and GMs would dream to have a guy like him. And then talk about Logan Schmidt, Carson Bullman, like Sean Duncan. I'm sure there's guys that you would say that left-handed pitching is a dire need, especially in today's baseball. Like we look at the way pitching has gone, and we haven't seen enough of those, especially the high school side. Like, talk a bit about these guys, and could they be factors in the future or like immediate impacts?
Yeah, this year's Southpaw class on the prep side is historically looking like it's going to be amazing. I would wager, you mentioned Sean Duncan, Bumia, Bowman, these guys behind Rojas that are going to be first round arms or first round caliber arms. And looking back at it, if we're mentioning 5 guys in the first round that are left-handed from the high school realm, I can't think of anything off the top of my head where we come remotely close to that. In terms of past drafts. So, like, I'll start with Bowman. Like I mentioned, 55 fastball, 2+ breaking balls. The polish is there. He's not super flashy. He's never really been that, but the track record's there. And for me, when I'm scouting, I'm looking for polish. I'm looking for pitchability. He's got both of those things that really let him stand out amongst the crowd when you're looking for guys that are just, I don't want to say throwing hard, but you're looking for more upside-laden guys, like the Gio Rojas. So, like, Bowman, in my opinion, is the most polished southpaw in this class. Logan Schmidt's not far behind. Like, he's another reclassification for 2027, where he's very deceptive. And what I mean by that, he hides the ball very well. The release point guys really struggle to see, and once it comes out of the hand, it jumps on you quick with good extension traits. And that's something we value a lot in the scouting community is fastball value. He's got a really good fastball. It's been up to 97 with carry. It's got some run out of the hand. Got a good changeup as well. I think the changeup's at least major league average, if not above average. But the field of spin has not been the same as some of his peers. Like, Bowman, I say, has potentially 2+ pitches. I would say Schmidt's more of like a fringe average, 45 grade at best at this moment. But guys can improve spin as we've seen in the past with like development traits and everything like that. You look at a guy like Sean Duncan, who super young for the class, super projectable. I understand, like, we talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he's such a fun kid to really talk to as well. It was a fantastic interview, but he's a guy that, like, again, fastball quality really stands out among scouts, and that's something we look for. He's got a fastball been up to 95, and he's been sitting there consistently this year, which is big because he used to be 88 to 91. The stereotypical, like, stock prototype left-handed pitcher that, like, you're going to grow into your body and throw harder. He's already shown the traits to throw harder. He's got elite arm speed. The breaking ball is good. The changeup's great. I think he's a guy that is going to get drafted pretty high. We have him at 18th on our board for perspective. But the guy I really want to talk about, Brody Bumia, you mentioned it. He's been seen a lot recently and on Twitter and everything. You don't find guys at that size. He's 6'9", 255. He is he's a basketball center. Yeah, he's a basketball center that plays baseball. Like, that's essentially what it is. And, like, Noah Schultz, for example, 6'10". Like, he struggled with I want to say, like, reining his limbs in a little bit. Bumia has some of the best body control for a kid his size I've seen in a long time. And, he's coming off an elbow injury. However, it's 101 from the left side. And finding velo like that from the left side is tough. It's not an easy thing to find. And you mentioned the idea of, like, we don't see a ton of southpaws at the big league level. Southpaws do get more leeway in scouting processes because of its rarity. So finding a guy who's doing this, throwing 101 with 7 feet of extension, a low release slot, he's going to be a vertical approach angle king in terms of the angles he creates going to the plate. And, that's an 80 grade fastball. We talked about Jack Bauer a year ago where he was touching 103 from the left side. My opinion of that is Bumia is better than what Jack Bauer was. And this might be a hot take, but I've talked about it with some people here in Charlotte. Jack Bauer, in my opinion, was a stiff mover Yes, he touched 103. That is very rare. I think it's the highest that's ever been tracked from a high school pitcher in general, but from the left side, it's even more so rare. But there's not a ton of extension. It's a two-seam shape. Strikes are very streaky with him, and he's kind of shown that in the SEC this year. I will say his breaking pitches and his off speed are way better than what Bumia's is right now. But I think Bumia has a better mold of clay here, where the fastball is already as good as you can get it. Like, that's an 80 grade fastball with what he has. You can improve the spin traits, get it to an average breaking ball. I think he's got a really good changeup. And the strikes have been there. So, like, he can dominate kids with the fastball. I think guys are going to look at this and go, he might end up being the best southpaw in this class, man. I'm like, going through scenarios where he might be a top 10 pitcher in this class, or like a top 10 pick. And, Gio Rojas is getting linked to the Royals at 6. I don't know how true that is, admittedly, but like, he's been linked there a few times by some of these bigger publications like Baseball America, Overslot, some of these guys that do first off, insane job with the draft and everything like that. So, like, there's going to be a really interesting conversation to have with Bumia on draft day. I think this is the guy that's going to be, no doubt, a top 15 pick. And the traits are they're off the charts good. That's like the best way I could really put it. Outside of him, Bo Holloway from Tennessee is a guy that he's been famous in the class for a while, been up to 98 from the left side, but slider's not really been there. The changeup's good. The strikes have been off and on. Lucas Naroki from Texas is kind of a shorter guy, but it might be a 70 grade slider. There are a few really, 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 really good like southpaws farther down, but obviously the command concerns or the lack of this second pitch are something that we have taken into account and kind of hope that gets ironed out. So that's why they're lower down. But like, again, this southpaw class it has a chance to be historically good. That's the easiest way I could probably put it.
So let's go to the right-handed side of the pitch. You mentioned how deep the left-handers are, the southpaws. With your top picks in this class, top guys like Jensen Hirschkorn and Coleman Borthwick and Joseph Contreras, the son of Jose Contreras, and Blake Bryant, Savion Sims, and so on. But talk about some of those guys and how the right-handed side stacks up in this class.
The right-handed side is not. I'm not going to say it's terrible. Like, there are some strengths there. Coleman Borthwick, like you mentioned, I think is personally the top right-handed pitcher in this class. He's got the size, the physicality, 6'6", 255. He's also touched 100. He has a track record of throwing strikes. He's got a really, really good slider. I just want that third pitch to kind of show up. But it's hard to ignore what he's been able to do in the past. He threw a complete game shutout to help the USA win the 18U gold medal at the World Cup this past year. So he's got the track record for it. Jensen Hirschkorn, 6'7", 205, been up to 95. Guys can't see the ball out of the hand very well. He struck out 9 at area coach, which I was at, which was arguably one of the best amateur outings I've ever seen in person. I think that's the best way to describe it. He was dominating end zone with the fastball, and when he went to go try and put together the slider to get strikeouts, guys just never saw it. And it's a deceptive delivery. Guys don't see the ball very well, like I said. And he extends well. Like, that's another thing that really I think is undervalued on the public scale is like we look at extension and how it kind of helps pitches play up, but also, if you're looking at guys, just as like stock, the extension really helps everything play up. It's a trait that's heavily valued, and guys are really going to go after that. So for him, like, he's got some growing to do. I think obviously LSU commit is going to make it tough for him to be signed away from that. But at the same token, I think he's going to have better development in a pro org than LSU, admittedly. Sorry, Jay Johnson, if you listen to this. But you know, that's just the way it is, unfortunately. Like the college development compared to the pro dev it's a wider margin than we think, especially when you've seen guys like Wake Forest the past couple years. But that's the tangent. Going back to the other guys, like Cooper Size from Orange Lutheran in California is a guy that's like super projectable, has 4 pitches, he knows how to pitch. He might be a higher floor, but there's stuff where like the arm speed stands out. He might be throwing 100 in a couple years. Caden Wechter, who's the son of Doug from the mid 2000s. He's a guy that's super, super athletic. It might be one of the best fastballs in the prep scene itself. But the biggest thing is like command trying to come back in, and he's got a good slider, good changeup, but he doesn't really use it a ton. It's really just fastball slider. So I want to see more of a third pitch. You know, we look at a guy like you had mentioned, Joseph Contreras, you know, pitches on a gigantic stage. You know, he faces Aaron Judge. He gets Aaron Judge to break a bat during the World Baseball Classic, which
World Baseball Classic, that's right.
Yeah.
You're 17. Like, you're 17 doing that to arguably the best hitter in the American League. You know, it's impressive. But he's been up to 99. You know, it's a higher slot. So, like, we kind of look for, like, outlier slots. And he's a guy that kind of fits that a little bit. And he's got his dad's forkball. It is a completely lethal pitch. The angle he creates is pretty steep, but it's going to be a lot of ground balls. He's got a good slider. And I'm going to coin it as a death ball, and what I mean by that is like it's a slider that has basically all vertical action, no horizontal break. So it's playing off the angle he creates, and he's getting like 5 to 6 inches of depth with it. And guys they're just watching it go down into the dirt and can't touch it. You know, so he's a guy that I really do like in this class. I think people are going to look at what he's been able to do the past year or so, and obviously big league bloodlines with his dad. That really help his case. And then even farther down the line, like Gary Morris, Denton Lord, Cole Kenninger. There's a few other guys that really stick out, like Eli Hirsch from Washington. Blake Bryant, you had mentioned. I really think he's a guy that is, again, I've undervalued this year. Is super projectable. Pitchability is there. Has been up to 96. I think he's a back-end first rounder or like a comp round pick at this point. And we got to fix that on our board on the next update. But like, there's quality right-handed arms. They're obviously just not to the same caliber as the Southpaws this year. I would say there's more question marks than there are answers when you compare, like, again, Coleman Borthwick to like Carson Bullman. You know, I think is going to be an interesting case to make for some of these guys. And again, commitments are tough to get out of too. There's a lot of LSU commits, a lot of Vanderbilt commits in this class. And those are schools that have history and they have amazing development programs. So we'll see what happens at the end of the day. But you know, there's some really good pitching in this class. I'll say that much.
I like to talk about players that doesn't get talked about enough, and high school players who could end up going to college, because you talked about Jack Bauer, for example, or Jojo Parker's twin brother, Jacob Parker, is committed to Mississippi State as well. So could you see any of these top guys not end up going to the draft, or do you think they're going to end up being committed overall?
There's a couple there I've like theorized could do it. Brady Harris has been a famous guy in this class for a long time. And admittedly, when we're looking at everything that's happened the past couple of years with him, it's a long swing. The hit tool is kind of shoddy a little bit. And he's aggressive at the plate, so like he'll struggle to. His swing decisions aren't the greatest, is probably the best way to put it. Like he's very aggressive, expands his zone a lot. So there's a lot of question marks to kind of answer there for him. But he's again been on the circuit for a long time. He could find himself at a point where like play center field full time. Maybe he's Judd Fabian 2.0. You know, Judd Fabian was a top 5 prospect in the class a few years ago, but then never really hit and kind of fell off a bit. He might be that kind of guy. Kevin Roberts, if we're going to stick on the theme of Florida commits, Kevin Roberts, again, freakishly athletic, and he was a two-way guy, but prioritized hitting this past year because of an injury. But loud power, and he's a really, really good athlete in center field and a good defender. But again, the hit tools kind of just lagged behind that a little bit. But if we're going off of what we've seen in the past, Quentin Young's the same kind of body type, same kind of mold of player. And Quentin Young was a second-round pick by the Twins a year ago, So I think somebody gives Kevin Roberts a bag to avoid going to Florida. And I do know for a fact that like he has already enrolled in some classes out there, which is kind of standard practice, but he put it out there on Twitter yesterday at this point. So we'll see what happens there. But those are two guys that really stick out to me as like they feel to me like more college, like going to college risk than some of these other guys. To me, it feels like there's maybe we're a bit too far out from the draft to know for sure what the overall look is with some of these guys, admittedly. But like obviously you're going to target some of these SEC commits that want to go to school, and even like Stanford. Stanford has a really good recruiting class this year. Tyler Spangler, obviously we talked about before, but they have the Harrington twins, Alex and Hunter from Cathedral Catholic out there in California. They have a few arms that I thought are pretty impressive, and Stanford could really use some of these because watching Stanford yesterday, they don't have pitching, admittedly. So, and the guys like that, they value school, they value their education. So Stanford commits are always tough, a year in and year out. Duke commits can be really, really tough unless you're Jordan Walker. So those are the guys to kind of look at and go like, hey, like these are going to be tougher to look at or to sign, but. Like I said, Brady Harris to me feels like a guy that should go to campus. Kevin Roberts, I feel like he probably should as well. But again, like I mentioned, I think somebody gives him enough money to kind of get away from that. And kind of like the Quentin Young archetype as what he was a year ago.
Compare this year's college position player class to the prep class, and just talk about how things are and how they're compared between the two. And with the top high school states being California, Florida, Texas, talk about a lot of the players that come from those states, and just how they seem to develop this high school talent that like is like no other.
Yeah, so I'll start with the college stuff. I do think the college position players specifically are way ahead of what the high school is. There's more depth at the top, and there's a lot more heavy hitters. Obviously, Rock's the obvious one at this point, or I don't want to say obvious, but like he's projected to be that. And then you look behind that, and you got guys a little bit just farther behind, like Drew Burris or AJ Gracia, who look like they're going to be top 15 picks. You got guys outside of that like Ace Reese, Logan Hughes, who all look like they're going to match, but obviously have defensive limitations. And then you got some other guys when you look farther up the board, or not farther up, but like farther down the board, where like, okay, Sawyer Strohsnyder from TCU, Eric Becker from Virginia, Derek Curiel from LSU. Like some of these guys are going to be first rounders because of their tool sets and how everything kind of works. The college pitching is definitely not as good. I think that's the weakest link in the entire class personally. But there is some really intriguing depth that's shown up in the past couple of weeks, or the past month rather. That's going to make everything a little bit more interesting, to add a little more wrinkles to the situation, which I'm excited for to kind of dive into. But yeah, that's my take on it. I think the position players are definitely better. There's more depth than what the high school side has. And then when we look at, you mentioned Texas, Florida, California, really it's just about population and, I guess money. Money is obviously like, you look at California, obviously living in SoCal, it's you need to have a very, very good job and to make a lot of money to live there, In Florida and Texas are kind of the same way. My home state, North Carolina, is kind of growing into that a little bit, but we don't have obviously the same kind of talent as some of these other states. So like you can find talent everywhere, but obviously it's more prevalent in these schools that have have the money, have the development that some of these other schools don't, like all these private schools. where they really do pride themselves in developing players and programs. Whereas, like, again, I'll use my example. Noah McLean went to Gardner High School. I went to Gardner High School. It's a public school in the middle of Metro Raleigh, essentially. But Gardner High never had like a dev team, or they never really had like a lab that some of these schools in Texas, California, or Florida do. So it's a lot more of like the talent stands out more than the development, and there's more, I guess, rawness to it. So I think that's the biggest thing that really sticks out for those states. Like, you just have the resources to really succeed and to develop these kids a lot more. Obviously, they travel a lot. Getting to USA, going to PG events, PBR events really helps them. And some of these states, like, again, I'll throw out like Vermont. Vermont's not really had a ton of talent come through their ranks. They have a guy this year, finally, in Caden McCarthy. But he really wasn't at big events last year because just the cost of living, the resources aren't quite there as what they are in some of these other states.
This is my favorite question probably in this episode, is comparing last year's high school class to this year's class. And if you look at it right now, I mean, when you talk about Seth Hernandez, probably one of the best pitching prospects in all of baseball. He could probably be the top 5 prospect once all said and done. He probably is already. But if you look at it, last year's high school class looks relatively deep. If you look at it, Ethan Holiday, Eli Willits, Billy Carlson, JoJo Parker, Xavier Davids, Cruz Shoe, the list goes on. And if you compare it to this class coming up, which is in July, like, how do you compare and contrast? Is there similar needs and depths in that situation, or would you say which class would be better in your opinion when you scouted last year's to this year's?
I would say 2025 is just a bit better. Like I mentioned before, the shortstop class was miles better than what we have this year. Admittedly, like, the depth it really stuck out to me last year. Obviously, JoJo Parker being the 3rd shortstop off the board, if I remember correctly, outside of Willits, and Ethan Holiday was drafted as a shortstop. Obviously, it's really impressive, like, how many guys were at the top last year, and this year doesn't quite have that same depth in that position that you would like to see, admittedly. Like, it's a little weaker on that front. Pitching is better, in my opinion. Obviously, we had Seth Fernandez a year ago, but outside of that, the next arm that was, high enough for me was like Cruz Schoolcraft or, like some of these. It was definitely college pitching was the better of the two demographics last year. So yeah, I definitely lean towards 2025 because you have better premium defenders and premium bats in the cornerstone positions up the middle, basically. That really stood out to me. So that's my answer on that, admittedly, and I'm sure it differs from person to person, but I that's how I viewed it last year. And comparing this class to next year, it's probably kind of the same. I'm not too far in depth on the 2027 class just yet, but there's some pretty intriguing talents on the prep side and on the college side as well.
Well, you mentioned about 2027 already. That was going to lead up to my next question. And the thing is, like, the way we've been talking about with prospect, a lot of these guys are reclassifying from next year's class to this year's class. Do you think it has to do with where baseball's going next year with the CBA lockout and stuff, or is just the fact like these guys are just want to they believe that they're going to get drafted, sign with whatever team they sign, and they get right away? Because, like, you look at, like, last year, for example, like, we seen a bunch of guys already well known, and obviously, and they're going to be up in the majors, and they say high school has the most upside out of all, right? So how do you look at next year's draft class, and why are next year's class, some of them are reclassified for this year?
Yeah, as much as I've talked to some people about this, like Carlos Colazo from BA, Joe Doyle, some of these guys are in the space with us and do a fantastic job, like I said before. But the answers I've gotten from them are basically like, we don't think it's anything related to a potential lockout or the idea that high schoolers are not going to be part of the draft moving forward, which that's another conversation to have. I think it's unique that we have the high school aspect of the draft. But at the same token, I see arguments to where it's like, again, it's weird, but most of the conversations I've had have concluded with, we think this is just guys understanding, obviously, their grades and their skills and kind of looking at like what's the best for them. I don't think there's anything driven in terms of like they're not going to get paid enough, or there's a lockout next year. Let me go into this class and kind of see where I stack up compared to others. I think it's just a matter of they truly believe in the skills that they have and the tools, and think that they definitely want to try and get a jump on the game, essentially, not have to waste another year going on the circuit, where they believe that they can be in a pro development program, right now. I think that's the biggest thing is it's these kids understanding what they have, and they really trust themselves and have this background from family, the agents that they work with, that they really do believe they can do this. And I'm all for it. I think it's exciting to see some of these kids that like reclass and believe in themselves and think that they can do this. And I think that's something that a lot of kids, if you're a player that happens to listen to this, like, if you believe you can do it, then hey, you're already one step ahead. You got the confidence to really go out there and do it. So I think that's just really the gist of it, is like these kids understand what they have, and they really do truly feel like they can start their clock a little earlier than having to wait another year and see fallout of something. But I don't think it's anything that CBA talks have really accelerated of. We've seen reclasses for years. Connor Griffin was a reclass. So there's a lot of things to really that go into it, but I don't think the CBA is one of them at this point.
There's been a lot of guys in the last 5 years, a lot of high schoolers that have developed in the minor leagues and are now coming up, and even some of the ones in recent years, but a lot of them are coming up now and finding success, like Noah McLean and Kyle Harrison, and you got guys that were drafted like Ken Caminiti. We have a couple in the Blue Jays system, Arjun Namala and JoJo Parker, who was drafted last year, who's just tearing the cover off the ball in A-ball. So, just talk about how important it's been in the last, about 5 or so years to just really hit on some of these high school picks and the upside that they have.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to kind of like interpret what we've seen, like Kevin McGonigal a couple years ago was not a top 30 pick. Yeah, like he wasn't a top 30 pick, and now he's arguably the best prospect in baseball. Connor Griffin, again, we mentioned him as a reclass. He was a guy that needed a swing overhaul, got the perfect fit for him, and now he's in the major leagues at 20 years old. The biggest thing for me when it comes to scouting high schoolers is, you had mentioned the upside, obviously, but they have a longer, development path. They have more time to really be molded into the players that they become, and there's some that obviously, like, you just look at them and they're like, okay, like they're going to be in the majors in a year and a half. It's fine. That's what Connor Griffin was. I would wager that's what Seth Hernandez is at this point, and like, that's rare in and of itself, whether it's college or high school or not. But routinely, like, you look at the development path for some of these guys, like I mentioned earlier, Grenlinger is going to be 17.2 on draft day, spend 2 years on the complex, and then you kind of figure out his path from there. And he debuts at 22. Some of these college guys who are already 22, 23, they don't have that kind of, I don't want to say runway, but they don't have as long of time in a development program than some of these high schoolers. And I think that's the thing that, like, you kind of look at it, you have a higher hit rate on developing high schoolers than you do college guys. You think about it, Bryce Harper, 2010. Granted, yes, he was drafted out of JUCO, but he was a high schooler. It's that's like the premium example I can give on that one. Manny Machado, if I remember correctly, was a high schooler. You know, there's a lot of these guys. I think Carlos Correa also was a high schooler as well, if I remember correctly. So like, you're going to have a lot more development time with these guys, and it's a plus for development teams that, again, have an understanding of what they know they want to fix and getting a way to do it. And again, the hit rate is a lot better in that demographic compared to the college guys. You know, it's pretty night and day. So, yeah, I think it is. Again, like I had mentioned, I don't want the high school aspect to be taken away from the draft if it does come to that, because again, it's unique and you find more development and find more success going that pathway compared to the college side.
Yeah, like I tell Rocky, I feel like the superstar players either come from international draft or high school. Like the last superstar player that was college, I guess you could say maybe Trey Turner when he came up. Like, it's been a while, right? Like, unless you're a pitcher. Pitchers maybe a little different, like Paul Skeens last couple of years. But, you know, like, just that upside. You can't find that upside anywhere, but I believe in, like, high school. Like, it's, like you said, it's projection, right? So
yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. It's a lot of projection. It's a lot of, again, like you had mentioned earlier, it's not like exact science. It's not finite details. But you're kind of guessing. You're making a hypothesis of what this guy can be, and you're trying to find ways to mold him into that and get value out of him. I think that's, again, that's just how scouting is. That's how it's always going to be. And I feel like if we take high school out of the equation, it's tougher to find some of these guys. Like, you're not going to get a lot more development time with them. In as much as, like, obviously they're 17, 18-year-olds, you know, I think to myself every single day, like, you know, it's kind of weird that I know a lot about some of these guys, it being my age and, you know, and looking at it. But I think at the end of the day, like, that's just how it has been and how it's probably going to continue to be, in my opinion. And being able to find success through these pathways is exactly why we still have them. You know, I think that's just how it's going to be.
And I've noticed with high school players, like some teams are willing to go in the third round, fourth round, and pay over slot. I don't know if you've seen that round. And I feel like it's so important. Like, I know we're Jays fans, but we had a couple guys that paid over slot. Like Landon Marutis, I think it was 3 years ago, was a high school kid. Tremendous upside, unfortunately, with Tommy John. He's worked his way. And Blaine Bullitt last year, they paid well over slot, and he was a Texas A&M commit. And he's looking like an absolute player. And is that a new trend now with high school players? Because, like, you're getting the money what you want, even though if you drafted late, and some of these guys are committed, and it seems like it's like premeditated with the whole process of guys getting drafted from high school and getting overslotted for so many reasons. And that's why they say, like, oh, they allocate the money and save money so they can get the later rounds to try to pay overslot. Is that a new trend today in today's baseball?
I would say so, especially with the addition of the slot values and the bonus pools. You know, we didn't have this obviously when we had like 40 rounds, but now that we've seen an era where the draft has been diluted down to 20 rounds. Obviously, we had the 5-round draft in 2020, but only having 20 rounds now, teams are becoming more aware and becoming more strategic with how they approach drafts. And, you know, like you mentioned, Blaine Bullard, we had him as like a 3rd-round grade for me when we did his board or his draft class, and he got paid appropriately with that same kind of value in like the 11th round. And that's teams working their way around these bonus pools to get the most out of it, really. Like, we've not had a team go over bonus pool values. They get close, they never go over it. And that's the way of the game now. Like, having this slot value system becomes kind of like picking teeth a little bit, or like plucking teeth rather, where you're finding guys that are going to fit your development traits a lot better than, say Exhibit A is better than Exhibit B at this, So you're going to take that and work on, focusing on that and improving X and Y and everything to make everything work. That's just how the draft is kind of turned into. And I like it. Draft strategy is fantastic. You start looking at some of these guys like the Brewers, for example, or Kings at draft strategy and finding the most value from these guys. Blue Jays, like you guys had mentioned, have found some of these overslot guys, pay him a lot more. Obviously, Morotis didn't work out, but the Lane Bowler looks amazing. And, I think a lot of teams are really leaning into that more, which is, again, great for us because it really keeps us on our toes. It creates wild scenarios. And I understand, like, not every year the best player goes and yada, yada. That's not what the draft is, in my opinion, especially in baseball, because you're not drafting for need. It's always either best player available, or if you happen to know that this guy fits better in your system compared to another, then hey, you take the gamble on it, you go for it. So that's where I'm kind of at with that is, again, like Paul Skeens was first overall, and we know what Paul Skeens is. He's a generational arm talent at this point. And
Right.
we had Dylan Cruz as 1-1 the whole year, and now Dylan Cruz is just starting to scratch the surface of what he is. So like public boards, as much as I enjoy making them, they're a crapshoot. Admittedly, like public boards, as much as teams look at them and kind of use them as like a baseline, their boards are going to be different from us at the end of the day. So that's why you always see like, oh, but the public had this. Like, well, the team's board is a lot different, and they probably value this a lot more than what I do because I'm just one person. So I guess that's a little mini rant, but like that's kind of what it is. So, like the draft is a very unique process, and having the draft strategies is, it turns me into a sicko a little bit. It's something I really value and look for, like when we're looking or doing mock drafts and having fun and kind of like trying to figure out what fits, works best, and everything like that. So it's fun. I really do enjoy it.
And you do a great job of what you're doing, man. And great stuff, man. Like we learn stuff every day, every time we always have a guest, and you do a great job of with your job and your insight and information. And we appreciate you being here as a guest. Where can we find you on social media and everywhere else?
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is at Tyler Jennings 24. Obviously working for Just Baseball Media, and then also with the On the Clock crew, the College Baseball Show crew, which they've done a fantastic job over the year that we've really had that going. So I'm proud of what they've been able to do. So follow me there. Again, at the ACC tournament all week. So if anybody happens to be listening to this and wants to say hi, feel free to find me.
Always.
But yeah, like this is such a fun job, and I'm really, 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 really happy that I was able to make a name for myself and having people in my corner to really help me out with that. And they know who they are if they listen to this. So, I got to give them all the props in the world for molding me into who I am. But it's a blast year in, year out to do this. I really, really do enjoy this job. And I'm glad that people enjoy the work, enjoy the content that we put out. It really does. It really feels good to see that all the stuff that we've done and to bust our ass, for lack of a better term, to put out there and have fun with. So I'm glad people enjoy it. I thank you guys for letting me come on. This has been, amazing to talk ball and to kind of break down the classes and everything like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man, it's, you got the best job in the world, man. So, watch baseball, scout baseball, be around baseball, so, it's cool, man. It's awesome to have you on, and we thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys again for letting me come on and break down everything for you guys. I really do appreciate it.
We will place a description below where you can find Tyler Jennings in social media and everywhere else. And yes, make sure you follow the College Baseball Show, and we will share Tyler's work, and he does a tremendous job at it. But till next time, take care, be kind to each other. Signing off from the Sports Avenue Twisted podcast on Thursday, May 21st, 2026.
Sports Avenue Twisted Podcast. Rob and Rocky talks everything sports.